With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister on Qatar investors, United Nations Committee to draft new global tax framework, CARICOM advocates for small island developing states, recent robberies on Nevis under police investigation, for sustainable future. Internationally, journalists in Gaza work in constant extreme fear. Now, the details. The Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is actively seeking to diversify its economy and build a sustainable future, with Prime Minister the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew extending a direct invitation to Qatari investors to partner in this transformative journey. In an interview with Doha News, Dr. Drew underscored the significant opportunities available in key sectors, emphasizing the nation's commitment to becoming the world's first sustainable island state. Prime Minister Drew highlighted the tremendous opportunity for Qatar-Caribbean partnership focused on sustainable growth, particularly in tourism and renewable energy. The Prime Minister noted the country's advantageous position in the Caribbean, one of the world's premier tourist regions, making it ripe for real estate investment and the expansion of its tourism product.
I have come to recognize that there are efforts to diversify the economy, which means investments locally and internationally as well. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and being situated in the beautiful Caribbean, one of the most touristic regions in the world, there's much opportunity for real estate investment, especially in the tourism sector. That, of course, is an excellent way. Why? We have beautiful beaches, beautiful shorelines that can be developed to meet the international market as we expand our tourism product. For example, I can say that we now have an investment from Safe Harbor, which is owned by a company called Blackstone, which is going to invest heavily in Christophe Harbor, which is to be developed into a major super yachting destination in the Caribbean. And therefore, I think even in that type of development and around that development that we call Christophe Harbor, where there are acres and acres of land available for real estate development, this is an area in which I think businessmen in Qatar can look to in terms of investing in the Caribbean. The other thing they can invest in is in the energy sector. It may not be oil and gas, but there are other opportunities such as geothermal. We have, I think, the largest known reserve that is accessible for geothermal in the region. Geothermal, comes from the volcanic activity that produces heat and can lead to energy. We also have solar energy, we have wind energy available. So in the renewable energy space, we have tremendous opportunity.
Prime Minister Drew underscored the importance of stronger ties with Qatar, highlighting shared values concerning climate action, sustainable development, and global cooperation.
I know Qatar and St. Kitts and Nevis established official diplomatic relations in 2017. It has been some time. And I think developing a relationship with Qatar can be helpful on multiple levels. Why do I say that? Qatar is a small country, relatively small. It has been blessed with significant natural resources, especially in the oil and gas area. And it's a country that has used it significantly for its own economic development, social development, political, and so forth. And so that is very admirable. But even though we are somewhat far apart, there are many things that we share in common. We are both countries, we are members of the United Nations, I would say that. And there are issues that we share. For example, the issue of climate change and sustainable development. I think our strategy here is to develop a sustainable St. Kitts and Nevis to deal with the issues of climate change. And I know Qatar has, to some extent, helped in those areas, not just country to country, but on an international basis. And Qatar has also helped with CARICOM, the wider Caribbean community of which we are part. So definitely there is a relationship. So our shared principles or shared vision on multiple things, those things we can join hand in hand to help to formulate a better world, a more progressive world.
Dr. Drew elaborated on a pivotal initiative, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which will play a critical role in the nation's financial, tourism, and energy sector development, as well as disaster management.
That Sovereign Wealth Fund would allow investments to be made, and that resource would be used to develop critical areas in St. Kitts and Nevis. You'll have an investment arm to develop critical areas. For example, as I said before, the ports, infrastructure, the financial sector. When we look at the areas of hospitality, tourism, energy, and so forth. All these areas. So the Sovereign Wealth Fund will create a fund that allows us to be able to have the necessary investments to develop these, what we call, game changers, investments that would shift the direction of St. Kitts and Nevis. So that is what we are looking with respect to our Sovereign Wealth Fund. It has another arm, which is an arm to deal with natural disasters, as you know, with climate change and so forth, and the disasters that are happening across the world, and of course here in the region as well, that would allow us to have, I would say, funding secured just in case we have to deal with any acute natural disaster as such. So the Sovereign Wealth Fund is really to help to accelerate our achieving the sustainable island state through strategic investments.
This comprehensive approach aims to ensure that the wealth of the nation is utilized judiciously, securing a lasting legacy for future generations and driving St. Kitts and Nevis towards its ambitious sustainability goals. Discussions at the United Nations to develop a new framework for international tax cooperation, a move that could significantly reshape global tax governance, were recently held. The United Nations General Assembly has established an intergovernmental negotiating committee to draft a United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation and two early protocols. This proposed international legal instrument aims to improve global tax cooperation, with the member state-led process expected to run from 2025 to 2027, striving for a truly inclusive and more effective international tax system. At the first working session of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for drafting the United Nations Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, the Honorable Garth Wilkin, Minister of Legal and Justice Affairs for St. Kitts and Nevis, delivered remarks on behalf of the Caribbean community, CARICOM. Minister Wilkin was recently elected as a vice chair on this very committee. In his statement, Minister Wilkin emphasized the unique challenges faced by small island developing states.
Chair, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 14 member states of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM. CARICOM warmly welcomes the establishment of the Intergovernmental Committee pursuant to General Assembly Resolution 79-235, which recognized the urgent need to develop a truly inclusive and effective framework for international tax cooperation. For too long, small island developing states and other developing countries have been marginalized in global tax governance, operating within systems that inadequately address our unique challenges and development needs. The current international tax architecture presents significant barriers to CARICOM member states in their pursuit of sustainable development, particularly in the taxation of cross-border services and the resolution of tax disputes. As highlighted in workstream discussions, many CARICOM countries depend on gross basis withholding taxes as a practical means of taxing non-resident service providers due to limited administrative capacities. However, this approach is often hindered by restrictive bilateral tax treaties that prevent the implementation of preferred taxation methods. As a result, our member states are subjected to an inequitable system in which complex transfer pricing rules, better suited to residence-based taxation models in developed economies, place undue strain on our already limited resources. This is why CARICOM believes the Framework Convention we craft must be anchored in the principle that efforts in international tax cooperation should be universal in approach and scope, and should fully take into account the different needs and capacities of all countries, as stated in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development. For CARICOM, this means ensuring that the Framework Convention provides practical solutions to our revenue mobilization challenges, while respecting our sovereign right to design tax systems appropriate to our circumstances. The Framework Convention must facilitate, not hinder, our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you, Chair.
The push for the United Nations Tax Convention has a significant historical background, building on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of 2015. This agenda called for stronger international tax cooperation and more inclusive global tax governance. The chosen legal format, a framework convention, is similar to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. This structure would outline objectives, principles, high-level commitments, and an organizational structure with detailed rules to be negotiated and added as protocols. Despite the broad support, challenges remain. Discussions in New York in April and May, as well as preceding workshops, revealed significant differences, largely splitting the world into two camps. The Global South generally anticipates a major role for new United Nations institutions in rewriting international tax rules aiming for greater taxing rights for developing countries. Conversely, a bloc of countries, including major OECD and EU members, prefer that new developments consider existing international tax rules and ongoing OECD work. Issues such as capacity building and domestic resource mobilization, while seemingly universally agreeable, have also highlighted these divisions. The recent discussions at the United Nations headquarters focused on drafting the terms of reference for the Framework Convention. The outcome of these negotiations will be a key indicator of the project's success and the future direction of international tax cooperation. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force is currently investigating two distinct robbery incidents that transpired on Nevis on the evening of August 8, 2025. These events underscore ongoing concerns regarding public safety and the prevalence of such crimes. The first reported incident took place in Stony Grove between 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Odalis Lynch Navarro of Stony Grove was reportedly entering her premises near the Charlestown Secondary School when she was accosted. A short male individual emerged from beside an outdoor galvanized shed, robbing her at knife point. The assailant made off with her gold necklace and hoop earrings. When Navarro called for help, the perpetrator struck her in the mouth and inflicted a cut to her left hand before fleeing the scene, running further down the road to a waiting vehicle. The second incident occurred later the same evening between 9 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. Callia Warner of the Cotton Ground Housing Project reported that she was robbed at knife point walking home from work at Paradise Beach. The assailant stole her black handbag, which contained personal items. Officers conducted a search of the area, however, none of the stolen property was recovered at that time. A short time after the second robbery, an unknown male matching the description provided by Warner was observed walking towards the Cotton Ground area. This individual was subsequently taken into custody and is currently assisting the police with their investigation. The Royal St. Christopher and Nevis Police Force is actively pursuing both cases. The police are urging anyone who may possess information pertinent to these investigations to come forward. In regional news,
the 2025 OECS Boxing Championship was a complete knockout. Blue economy entrepreneurs are empowered by the UBEC Business Development Services information sessions in Grenada. The staff of the OECS Commission paid tribute to Her Excellency Elma Jean Isaac, a long-serving commissioner of the OECS Ambassador of St. Lucia to CARICOM and experienced diplomat. The St. Lucia Boxing Association, OECS Commission, and the St. Lucia Tourism Association hosted the 2025 OECS Boxing Championship from August 1 to August 3, 2025. Fighters from the region battled for the top spots. Boxing fans enjoyed matches at the Rodney Bay Pavilion in Gros Islet, St. Lucia. Let us take a look at the highlights of the coveted event. The Unleashing the Blue Economy of the Caribbean, or UBEC, aids growth of blue economy MSMEs in Grenada. We have more in this report. Grenadian micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the blue economy benefited recently from Business Development Services information sessions on the Regional MSME Matching Grants Program. These sessions were hosted by the Unleashing the Blue Economy of the Caribbean, or UBEC project. The program provides funding to these blue economy MSMEs. An online session was presented to MSMEs in the fisheries, marine tourism, and waste management sessions in Grenada, while a physical session was hosted at the Madonna Harford Conference Room Grenada Public Workers Union, Tantine St. George's. Business Development Services consultant Dr. Janelle Murray led the information sessions and engaged numerous MSME owners from around the island, eager to elevate their businesses.
Coming out from the business diagnostic assessments, we would understand more about the businesses, what their strengths and weaknesses are, where the gaps lie, what needs they may have. And then we will be able to develop a group training and capacity building program. So we're aiming to try and close those gaps and to address some of the business challenges that persons may have after the business diagnostics, right? And coming out of that training and development program, persons will be able to improve their knowledge and skills in terms of business management and to improve the operations of their business, all right? So we may look at things like record keeping, costing and pricing, grant proposal writing, business plan development, and so on.
Beyond the business training and capacity building program, coaching and mentorship support will be offered. UBEC is an OECS-managed, World Bank-funded program which harnesses the economic potential of the Eastern Caribbean's marine resources while promoting environmental sustainability. These information attendees were also hopeful the program would push micro, small, and medium enterprises in the blue economy in Grenada.
Yeah, I think the business developmental training would be quite ideal for me, especially with my business.
Based on the discussion this afternoon, it seems that most people aren't necessarily ready for gathering funding on their own, whether it's through local banks, financial institutions on a whole.
Similar information sessions were held in St. Lucia throughout the month of June, and in the coming weeks will be held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Fishing communities like that of Woburn in Grenada could benefit from the regional MSME matching grants program. The OECS Commission mourns the passing of Her Excellency Elma Jean Isaac. Isaac was a long-serving commissioner of the OECS Ambassador of St. Lucia to CARICOM and an experienced diplomat. She was also one of the many integral architects of the regional integration movement. Isaac joined the Regional Integration Unit as a consultant and was appointed as that department's head in 2011. From 2017 to 2025, she was St. Lucia's commissioner to the OECS. Take a look at this next video with highlights of the OECS Commission's tribute to a beloved friend and colleague.
Good morning, colleagues. We have again to meet here in a similar circumstance as we did recently to observe and remember a former colleague. Most of us would have heard by now that of the recent passing of Miss Elma Jean Isaac, who once served the commission as head of RIU and who was, well, at the time of her passing, still the commissioner for St. Lucia to the OECS.
Shall we pray? Our great God, our loving Heavenly Father, again we come before you at such a sad moment on the passing of our colleague, friend, and in some cases relative of Miss Elma Jean Isaac. But Lord, we are grateful that we know you and we have you to come to. The one who alone fully understands, the one who yourself empathize because you walked this path before us. We trust you, God, with our minds, with our thoughts, with our hearts. And we pray, oh God, in a special way for the family, that you would strengthen and comfort and guide them and provide maybe not answers that they want, but clarity and comfort in this important time.
For the full video, go to the OECS's YouTube channel. Finally, this is an important public notice from the OECS Commission. It has come to our attention that AI-generated videos are circulating online using manipulated footage of the OECS Newslink anchors and St. Lucian officials to promote a so-called investment platform. We want to be clear, these videos are fake. They are not endorsed by the OECS Commission or by the government of St. Lucia. We urge the public to exercise caution. Do not click on suspicious links or provide personal information to platforms advertised in these deceptive videos. For accurate updates, please follow official OECS communication channels.
We now bring you these international reports.
Well, earlier, my colleague Nick Clark spoke with Al Jazeera's Gaza Bureau Chief Wael al-Dahdouh, who lost his wife, 2 children and a grandchild to Israeli attacks. His eldest son, Hamza, was also a journalist, and he was killed in a targeted Israeli strike on a car carrying a group of media workers in January last year. Wael described the challenges facing journalists working under constant threats to their lives.
ما يجري ليس معقول وليس مبرر.
What is happening is unjustifiable and not in line with any law, with any humanitarian law or any human values. Therefore, this is astonishing and we should condemn it. How can they target a tent where journalists were sheltering? Everybody knows who was in this tent. They are parts of the Al Jazeera family and they work from this tent. So I think that such a thing was targeted. It was done on purpose, and that's why we are surprised and astonished. Why would you target our colleague Anas al-Sharif and his colleague, Mohammed, and other colleagues and the team that was with him? And before this, there was also a series of murdering journalists who were targeted and killed in different ways, in different places, while they were doing their job. So the question is, why are they also targeting the family members of the journalists? I personally had my family members, including my wife, my children, my cousins from both sides, all killed in the same attack. And why? We don't know. Nobody has an answer. Therefore, we are asking, what does Israel want from these consecutive and continuing attacks? We do not understand it, and it cannot be justified.
You've lived and breathed that life as a reporter in Gaza. Give us a window of what it's like to brave the daily threats from the Israelis, of everything that's going on around you, of the daily killing that's happening, and then at the end of the day, still being under threat and not being able to leave this front line.
باختصار شديد الصحفي في قطاع غزة.
I can say briefly that a journalist in Gaza is working in a minefield. It's like someone who would put his soul in his hand and just walk away. He knows that he could be the news, the breaking news at any moment. Or it could be his friend, his colleagues, or even his family members. Sometimes from the same media family. Or sometimes it's a friend, a neighbour, or any displaced person in the tents. The Palestinian journalist carries out his job on the street. They live on the street. They do not have a home. They do not have an office. They do not have logistical support. They do not have security or safety. And when possible, they shelter in a tent. So they carry out their work from the street, literally. For example, if they lose their mobiles or an electrical cable and want to replace it, they do so in extreme fear. They are scared of being targeted at any moment by the drones that are jamming the skies of the Gaza Strip. Those drones get so close, near tents where they work, where the journalists are trying to work, or to sometimes get some rest. The journalists also work while starving. They feel hungry. They cannot find water. They suffer from the same conditions as all the other people in Gaza. We were not able to recognise the bodies of many of our colleagues. We can't recognise them because they've lost half of their weight. And I have to mention here that it is 1,000 times more difficult now. These journalists spent time together with their neighbours and their colleagues, also trying to at least secure just a few grams of flour and a few litres of water. They also spend time trying to collect information and images so that they can broadcast them to the whole world. The international community does not know what is happening, the starvation, the killings, and that's why the journalists are targeted, because they thwart Israel's plan. Israel is bothered by the journalists, and that's why Israel doesn't allow foreign journalists in Gaza, despite all the pressure being exerted from different sides.
It's such important and courageous work, isn't it? On this tragic day for journalism and indeed for our colleagues, how would you remember Anas and his team that have died so tragically?
هو حقيقة هذه من أصعب الأمور
In fact, this is one of the most difficult things for a professional journalist as myself, remembering my colleagues. This is very difficult. This is very tough. As tough as remembering the loss of the loved ones, including the wife, the children, and our relatives who are part of our body and our hearts. So remembering that every one of our colleagues had a story, ambitions, a family, how they used to sleep, how they used to walk, how they used to cope with the situation. With this, how they used to stand in front of the camera, how they used to face all the problems and to work and be part of a team. They have also the spirit of perseverance, determination as well, despite all these circumstances. So you share a piece of bread with your colleagues. Maybe sometimes you share a place to sleep, some sheets to cover yourself, and you just wait for the worst to happen at any moment. Sometimes you take risks together just to get some footage or images that you can share with the rest of the world. This makes the journalist a real partner in the soul and in the body and in the mission of conveying the message. So when you are killed in this horrific way, you really feel that you are losing a part of your soul, a part of your body, a part of your past, and also a part from your future, from the story that you want to tell, from the ambitions that you have. Some of our colleagues across the world may have experienced some similar conditions to a certain extent, but I do not believe that they've lived the conditions in which we have. That's why I say to our colleagues across the globe, especially in Europe and in the United States, have a big role and a big mission towards their colleagues. We look at them as we are one body, as we are partners in humanity and the profession that we exercise, and also the humanitarian message that we are trying to convey. And we are risking our lives to convey this message for the whole humanity. And for all those reasons, we have paid a big price.
Indeed, Anas and the team gave their lives to tell the world the reality of life on the ground in Gaza. Very briefly, Wael, if you would, how do journalists in Gaza feel? And you are one of them. How do you feel about the fact that this story that you've been witnessing and telling the world about, and yet there is no real international action from world leaders?
هو من أصعب المشاعر والتجارب التي يمكن أن تعيشها كصحفي.
It is one of the most difficult and toughest feelings that you can experience as a person, as a human being in Gaza, which is like a big prison. You face all these challenges on a daily basis while exercising your profession. And sometimes you have this feeling that you are someone who is just a drop in the ocean. It's the same feeling, or pouring water in the desert. Maybe they empathise with us, sometimes a little. However, nobody is really doing anything in a serious manner in order to put an end to this tragedy and to this genocide. In fact, this is one of the toughest and most challenging experiences that you can have as a journalist, as you expect your brothers in the same profession or from the world to do something. That's why I have to say that sometimes in an honest way. We think, frankly, that this silence is even more heartbreaking than the fact that we were bombed.
BBC analysis has found that the waters around the UK have had their warmest start to the year since records began, and it's all because of climate change. But what are the consequences? Here's our climate editor, Justin Rowlett.
Heather Hamilton and her dad, David, are keen snorkelers. They've been going out into the seas around Cornwall virtually every week since Heather was a little girl. But in recent years, they have seen some big changes. Huge blooms of these jellyfish-like creatures called salps, for example. They're normally rare in UK waters.
When you're above the water, you'd have no idea that they're even there. And as soon as your head goes submerged underwater, you're seeing these big chains, almost glowing slightly. Almost like fairy lights is the way I'd explain it, kind of just swirling through the current, connecting with one another. But yeah, it just felt very kind of out of this world, something I've never seen before.
And then there are the octopuses, hundreds of them.
I've been snorkeling 30 odd years. I've never seen an octopus. I saw my first one last summer for the very first time. And with Heather this was it May or June we saw?
Yeah, end of May, I think.
End of May, we entered a special spot of ours and we saw about 10 of them. Absolutely amazing creatures.
Out in open water, there are some even more dramatic sights. This was filmed off the coast of Cornwall last week. Dozens of bluefin tuna are feeding. They started appearing in our waters about 10 years ago. Bluefin tuna can grow to up to 3 metres long and weigh more than half a tonne. Two local lads, Harry Polkinghorne and his friend Ollie Hayes, have been fishing together for the last 5 years and posting online videos of what they catch and see.
Just take a look at this. This is when we were filming off Lanzane. It was just absolutely incredible.
God, that is a huge fish, isn't it? I think you can see it taking a garfish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just came straight out the water, the whole fish. Sometimes you'll just get one come up, and then other times when they find a big shoal of bait fish, you'll see one, then two, and then suddenly 1,000 will just appear out of nowhere, circle them, and they close in, eat them all, and then they all disappear again. And it's just incredible.
And that's not all. Down here in the southwest, there are increasing reports of sightings of humpback whales and even fin whales, the world's second biggest whale species. Some scientists are saying it's like a canary in the mine, pointing the direction to the kind of changes we can expect to see around the UK's coasts as our climate continues to change. Floating sensors are being loaded onto the UK's main ocean monitoring vessel, the Endeavour. They take all sorts of measurements, including temperature.
From the monitoring and the surveillance that we have, we can see that the seas are warming. We're also seeing heat waves coming through now. So what used to be a sort of a 1 in every 10 years event, we're now seeing almost every year. And the fish and the animals that live around the UK are changing in response to that. We're getting warm water things like squid and anchovy and even things like triggerfish coming in from the south.
But warming seas don't just bring new species. The whelk fishermen of Whitstable have seen the impact this kind of marine heatwave can have firsthand.
We knew there was something wrong then. If you put a pot anywhere shallower than about 10 metres in depth, you just weren't catching anything.
Fisherman Ben Cooper's whelks are processed in a factory in Kings Lynn and exported to Korea. Catches had always been good until 2022. Then sea temperatures in the Thames estuary went above 20 degrees Celsius for more than 60 days. There was a massive die-off of whelks.
After sort of 2 or 3 months of abysmal catches, we just thought, look, we've got to do something now, otherwise we're just going backwards too quickly. And so we ended up selling one of the boats.
There has been some recovery since, but Ben is worried.
We've become so reliant on the whelks because everything else has disappeared. It's a shame it's come to that, but I think, no whelks, no fishermen in Whitstable.
It is a warning that, while warming seas may sometimes bring exciting new species to our shores, they can also damage marine ecosystems and the human livelihoods that depend on them. Justin Rolat, BBC News, Cornwall.
The Fed faces its next data hurdle with its easing cycle hanging in the balance. Firming bets that the Fed is primed to resume cutting interest rates will be tested by this Tuesday's release of US inflation data. A hot number could shake the narrative that the Fed will cut rates at its next meeting in September, which has gathered steam after surprisingly weak employment reports earlier this month. Janet Moy is head of market analysis at RBC Brewin Dolphin. So Janet, June inflation data showed the biggest rise in 5 months. What are you expecting this month?
So I guess it's fair to expect that the US inflation will pick up slightly both on a headline and a core perspective. In fact, we have been seeing core goods inflation edging a bit higher over the past couple of months. So I guess that's the starting evidence of tariffs. So we expect that to be slightly more apparent, but probably still not reflecting the full impact yet, of course, because we have been, having changes here and there, and also companies are still running down their inventory. So I guess that should put inflation a bit higher. But on the other side, we have to remember that shelter inflation is actually the biggest part of US inflation basket. And on that front, we keep seeing a slowdown in the rental component. So the official measure is often a bit lagging. If you look at the Zillow rent index, it has been running at about 3% year on year, which is way lower than what the CPI is implying. So I guess there's a bit of push and pull factor on inflation, but I think the markets are currently expecting a slightly higher inflation compared to last month.
This is the first release by the BLS since President Trump fired its chief. Can we fully trust the numbers to be free from political interference?
Well, I guess it's a bit too early to expect that sort of influence. I guess I think we have to understand that the collection of these CPI data, it has been following a certain methodology for ages and is carried out by professional and experienced staffers and calculated by statisticians that has been with the BLS for a long time. So I guess it's a bit too premature or dramatic to worry too much about the trustworthiness of these data. But I understand the market's concern. I think if we see data that is dramatically different or deviate from what we usually tend to see, then obviously it raises question, and the markets will definitely scrutinize that. But I don't expect that to really happen here.
Let's switch now, Janet, to the jobs market, and continuing claims rose to the highest since the end of 2021 last week. Is the US labour market in trouble?
I don't think the US labour market is in trouble, but there is indeed some weakness that is showing up in recent data. As you have said, it's a continuous claim edging higher, is the recent job creation that has been dramatically slower, unemployment rate edging up, and the labor participation rate is basically slowing down. So these are problematic, but it is not falling off a cliff. We have to understand that. It's still relatively healthy. I mean, we basically had very strong labor market gains, and the market has been very resilient over the past couple of years despite so many challenges. So we're pretty much in late cycle stage, where slowdown in this sort of data is pretty normal. So I guess it's really the extent of the slowdown. Are we going to tip into recession? And I guess that the question is no.
Comments from Fed's Bowman over the weekend as well. She said she favours 3 interest rate cuts this year. Do you see this as likely?
Well, I guess that's a pretty rapid pivot from the Fed. If we see 3 rate cuts, it basically means 1 rate cut in September, October, and then December. And for that to happen, we need a much weaker labor market, and importantly, we need inflation to be slower than what we currently see. So it's not entirely impossible, but I guess it's a bit difficult. I would expect maybe a first cut in September, and then the Fed to move cautiously depending on the data. Perhaps another rate cut in December, but I see 3 rate cuts from now is pretty challenging.
Meanwhile, 3 other policymakers have expressed concerns of sharp cooling in the labour market. Could we see more dissent among the central bank?
Again, I think is possible, because right now we're at a junction where the data is not entirely clear at the moment, and there are certainly policymakers that are worried about the impact of tariff on inflation, and there are some that are less worried because they thought tariff is more transitory and they focus on the weaker labor market. So I think the right now is quite balanced in terms of the view. But as I said, if the data starts to worsen on the labor market front, and if indeed there's not too much of an inflation shock from tariffs, then I guess the tilt of the Federal Reserve balance can be towards the dovish side. That's entirely likely.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister on Qatar investors, United Nations Committee to draft new global tax framework, CARICOM advocates for small island developing states, recent robberies on Nevis under police investigation, for sustainable future. Internationally, journalists in Gaza work in constant extreme fear. Thank you for listening.